The following is an excerpt from the book More. Government's Only Solution to Fixing the Problems It Creates. Available on Amazon. Social Security, Stranger Than Fiction. I have an idea for a novel. It is a political conspiracy story full of suspense with a jaw-dropping conclusion. I'm thinking George Clooney can play the lead when a film studio buys the rights to make it into a movie. The story takes place on a fictional island with modern technology, a functioning republic government, and efficient labor markets. The island is several generations into existence after the first settlers colonized it and established the republic. As a republic, the government was set up with limited powers to prevent its blob-like nature from taking place as it had done so in the colonizers' country of origin. Over time the government had been successful at overstepping their powers outlined in the Constitution, but the citizens were willing to turn a blind eye to this power theft as they enjoyed unprecedented high standards of living due to a level of freedom that was unheard of that resulted in an abundance of economic activity and growth. Currently the island has about 10,000 people with 100 of them, 1%, working in government. The story starts off with a meeting of the 100 government workers. Though the constitution of the island outlines the government's limited role and puts the emphasis on free market capitalism to solve the majority of problems and demands that arise, through time the government officials have found ways to grow their power by convincing the voting public that they need government services far more than they ever realized. Over time the 100-person government has convinced the other 9,900 inhabitants of the island to fork over 35% of the wealth that they create through their work to pay for government services, most of which goes to the pockets of the 100 individuals running the government. For every 100 fish that a fisherman catches, he gives 35 of them to government so that they can eat. The most popular clothing line company hands over 35% of what they produce to the government every quarter. One inhabitant spends his days searching the forest for high-quality coconuts. He really believes in the authority of the government and doesn't want to let them down. He doesn't even wait until he finds the round number of 100 to pay his tax. For every coconut he finds he immediately measures it and chops off 35% of it and takes it to the government tax collection offices on the very same day. The 100-person government lives a high standard of living compared to the average private worker of the remaining 9,900 people. Some would say they have the life of nobility even though that word isn't used often since we are dealing with a free republic. Despite their life of luxury, the people of the government want more. However, simply raising the tax is not a solution as there has been some chatter among some of the more productive inhabitants that the 35% tax is already too high. However, where there is a will there is a way. Frank Rooster, one of the more creative 100 government officials, has come up with a solution to grow the power of the 100 at the expense of the 9,900. Mr. Rooster calls for a secret government meeting to explain his plan. We can't raise the income tax anymore without a potential revolt. I mean, let's be honest, the fact that we've been able to convince them to give us this much already is a testament to our superior intelligence and their stupidity, he explains as an evil laughter breaks out among the 99 listening. Instead we will sell them a mandatory insurance plan of sorts that will provide them with retirement income so that they won't have to worry about working when they become old. What do you mean by mandatory, and how will this help us as we will still be liable for paying back the money we steal, collect? Asks Private Paul, one of the few government workers who has a little experience in the private sector. Frank Rooster smiles and continues to explain. Everyone must pay into this retirement insurance program like a tax. And just like a tax, we will demand that employers take the money directly from their employees' paychecks, but on a different line item than the 35% income tax we are already imposing. We don't want the people to associate the new retirement insurance tax as a tax, so we will sell it as a way for the people to save and invest for their retirement. Now, as far as being liable, we will put into the law that creates this new tax stipulation that people cannot receive payouts from the program until they reach a certain old age. Since everyone is required to participate, when the time comes to pay out the first wave of people, there will be an even bigger working population at that point in time to pay the bill. Meanwhile, we can spend what we take in from the payments today, and besides, if there is a shortage of money to be paid out in the future, that will be decades from now when most of us won't even be around. Carpe diem, exerts Mr. Rooster. Henry Morgenthau, the government worker in charge of collecting and dispersing the tax income, raises a concern. If we're going to be collecting money for people's retirements, they are going to expect us to invest the money and for that pile of money to be growing over time. They won't just let us take more out of their paycheck while we spend it on larger houses, fancy cars, and vacations, which, let's face it, that's what we are all wanting to do with these extra funds. Do I have to think of everything? There is a very simple solution to this problem. We will create an entire new government department called the Retirement Insurance Program that will be in charge of managing the incoming and outflowing, when the time comes, of the funds. Some of our children need jobs anyways since we have no real skills to pass down to them. Our children can continue in our footsteps as unproductive government workers who trick the rest of the population into thinking we're performing a valuable public service by having them work for this new organization that will be funded by this new tax. As Morgenthau has pointed out, we will have to invest the incoming money. But here is where we will be creative. In the bill that creates this law and new government department, it will state that the only asset that the program can invest in will be government IOU papers that we will call government treasury bonds and that will pay a small interest rate. In this way the money is simultaneously being invested and coming directly to us where we can spend it how we want. The crowd of government personnel erupts into applause showing their pleasure in the Rooster plan. All are ecstatic except for Private Paul who waits for the applause to cease before raising a few concerns. The business owners of our island will not fall for this. They will understand that handing the money over to the government treasury for us to spend is not true investing. Of course they will, exclaims Rooster. Just to make sure, we will start a secret campaign to promote the idea that intelligent investors invest in government treasury bonds for their high level of safety. We will put it into the curriculum of all economic school classes which we control, and we will force financial planners to have to pass an industry exam where they will be taught that all people should allocate a certain amount of their savings into government bonds. Over the years people will come to accept the idea that the older they become, the greater amount of their savings should be allocated towards government bonds for safety and peace of mind reasons. Stipulating in the law that the retirement insurance tax must be invested in government bonds will only further emphasize these ideas, a self-fulfilling prophecy of sorts. Years come and go and the conspiracy comes to pass with success. As decades go by, the working people of the island are duped into handing over more of their hard-earned wealth to the government on the pretense that they are investing in their retirement nest egg. In reality, the money taken out of their paychecks ends up in the hands of the government people who are now able to spend it on fancier cars, houses, vacations, or whatever else they decide. If you haven't already figured out, this fictionalized story is very on point to the true story of Social Security. The government takes money from everyone, forces them to buy treasury bonds. That money is spent by the government immediately. Everyone else becomes poor over time. This has been an excerpt from the book More. Government's Only Solution to Fixing the Problems It Creates, at Your Expense. Available on Amazon.